Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in Silicon Valley, here at the Santa Clara Convention Center. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're following this next general session out there on the World Wide Web via SYS-CON TV. We have Compuware up next. We have Mark Hillman, the VP of Product Strategy. Just 30 seconds before that, just to remind you, the show floor, as you know, is open, so when after Mark's done, perhaps, and absolutely not until, you might want to stroll by the Heracles stand, spelt just like Heracles but with a K. They're going to be giving away an iPad each day from now on. So at 5 p.m., I believe, we're going to announce and give away an iPad, so you can, of course, check your Cloud Expo schedule on it. So go past Heracles, drop your card, and there'll be a drawing at 5 p.m. But much more importantly, we're going to find out how to see through the cloud. Mark Hillman from Compuware. Let's welcome him, please.
Thank you, Jeremy. So there's big news at the conference. I've heard all kinds of presentations about what we all ought to be doing relative to using the cloud, how to use the cloud, and that we're going to use the cloud. But I guess I'm here to tell you some big news, which is the reality is everybody, just about everybody, in fact, already is, but you may or may not know that, right? The reality is here today, in fact, and I'll show you some hard data that shows what's exactly happening with the cloud providers in the market and with applications. But the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is if you look at this slide and you go back and think about applications in the Internet, back in time, we talked about a simple thin browser, right, a thin client, and the Internet was basically a dumb pipe. The reality today is that has fundamentally changed. The reality already today is, first of all, everybody expects that they can get to everything from here, right? And the applications are not a simple, thin client. They're getting thicker. Oh, we don't use the word thick client anymore, do we? Excuse me. Rich Internet app. So we've got a 1 gigahertz processor on the client. And in fact, if you look at what makes up a modern app today, there's all kinds of components that come together at the browser to make up what is a modern app, right? So really, when you think about it, while we talk about the data center and we talk about cloud, the fact of the matter is the modern computing platform, right, is aggregated at the browser and runs through the cloud and a variety of services, be them public or private, and connecting to the data center. Now, I'm sure I'll get somebody who's want to debate with me that that's not a cloud service, that's a web service, this is a service, what is a cloud? Forget it. That's not the point at all. The point is that from an application standpoint, all these services have to come together. They all must be there and come together at the browser for the application to be complete. That's a fundamental shift in our paradigm. The amount of computing, the literal compute cycle execution happening outside of the Internet today is actually massive in any normal application. The other thing is, think about what are the apps that you run out here. The apps that run across the Internet today tend to be the most important applications in the enterprise. They tend to be customer-facing, dealer-partner-facing. They're affecting revenue, market share, and brand. By definition, they are the most important things in the company. So we believe that the way to look at the problem is to start to think of the applications as basically being borderless. They're not within the four walls. Number two, we believe that whole distribution system, the web application delivery chain, right, is essentially a cloud delivery type of platform, as long as you don't want to debate with me what the definition of cloud is. And I said that it matters, and these are the most important apps, right? There's all kinds of data. There was all kinds of data presented at Velocity, Structure, that talked about how much it matters for these apps. And we're talking about tangible dollar impact, brand impact when these applications are not up, of high abandon rates, right? So the fact of the matter is, because of the consumer expectations that have been created by guys like Facebook, et cetera, right, everybody expects to get to everything reliably at their fingertips, or they bail, right? So it really matters, and now we've got to start thinking about this delivery chain more holistically. So There's a big difference, though, when you think about how you're going to manage this versus when it's in your internal data center. Right? So first of all, the cloud is basically opaque. There's a certain amount of metrics data that you can see about it, right? But it's actually limited versus the problem solving we think of in a normal application debug cycle. Right? Secondly, it's shared. And, it's interesting. Let me read you a couple things I heard this week. It was fascinating from the Amazon guys. It's shared, and the concern is, right, that the effect of other people in the cloud are going to hurt me. Now, it depends on who you listen to. Some people tell you, oh, no, it's all great. The facts are opposite of that. First of all, you maybe heard that the AWS guys have a new high-performance offering that they call cluster compute. And what they've done is provided dedicated VMs, right, and guaranteed IOs per second. Right? Why? Because, right, other people, it's a shared environment. This is all good, right? It's all good, but it's a shared environment, and you have to pay attention to that fact. Werner Vogel, the Amazon CTO, there was a quote in Steve Riley's presentation yesterday, said, everything fails all the time. Right? It's not a bad thing. It's a point of view. It's about the architecture. It's about how you manage it and changing fundamentally how we look at the problem. Right? This is not your father's data center. Right? And then lastly, Steve Riley yesterday talked about the looser the apps are coupled, right, the more we can scale them. So yeah, the complexity is going up, right, but the potential effect has to be considered and managed. Oh, it's not going to click for me here, huh? There we go. All right. So if the effect of the rest of the internet, if the effect of the other people in your environment from your supply base are making an impact, that is going to have a direct impact on customer sat, on the user expectations. I think I'm going to have to be by the podium here. Sorry. Okay. All right. So let me show you some data to support the hypothesis and exactly what's happening. First of all, one of the parts of our company is a operation called Gomez. They do web performance measurements. And just to give you a sense of the scale, we do about 1 billion measurements per month, right? From a couple different points of view, from a data center backbone grade nodes, right? And from what we call last mile, which is consumer grade PCs doing tests for us in addition to be able to load tests. So when you take a look at through all that data, this is what we found. And I said there's all kinds of sources that come together to create that application. Here is, when you look at the averages, right? And it's interesting there's such a variation by city to city, but the point is we found that for the average web page, right, in North America here, it's about 9 hosts, 9 services that have to come together to produce one page. So guess what? You're already in the cloud. You already have a multi-vendor environment that's potentially affecting critical applications. So just to kind of put more of a point on it, and I'm sure you're going to want to jump in on this one, right? We found when we looked at those measurements, the percent of web app transactions that are running through EC2, 1/3. Okay, so everybody raise their hand that says, but I'm not using EC2. Yeah, I know. You're confused. Right? The reality is, because of the layering, if you start thinking about the different providers in the market between pure hosting guys and managed hosting guys and SaaS and PaaS guys and all that, the reality is now maybe some small amount of a component, a tracking bit, a piece of graphics, something from the ad guys, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is, the services are already being provided this way. And again, all this stuff has to come together if, right, that page is going to complete. So when you look at the problem, the fundamental reframing we have versus an internal to the company point of view, right, we have to look at service management from the enterprise and the internet all the way across to balance exactly what's going to happen. Right? There are plenty of bombs and potential breakpoints, and we can tell you all about it, right, from what we see. But all those layers and all those potential breakpoints are in a modern application, or they're affecting performance. Right? They may affect availability, they may affect performance, but there are a whole series of them across that entire chain. So the important reframing, thinking about how we run modern apps differently is it's about time and speed. Right? How long does it take me to resolve a critical issue? Right? So we start to talk about looking at the problem from the top down versus traditional tools that looked at the problem from the bottom up. Right? You're running inside and outside. So the first question is, right, is it an internal problem? Right? Is it in the general internet? Is it my ISP? Right? Is it some vendor in my chain? Video, shopping cart, right? Content, one of the edge caching guys, or in fact, is it in the browser? Right? Is it in the actual device? We have to understand all of those layers, put them together in a context that's meaningful in order to resolve the problem as quickly as you can, and then once we've isolated the domain it's in, then do the deep dive traditional approach. So under this approach, measurements really become everything. Think about this, right? This is not a sales pitch. Think about the problem approach. When it was in your data center, 2 boxes in a cluster, basically fixed unless somebody did a code drop. The network was basically fixed. So once you built something and tested it, okay, fine. The performance and the availability was essentially known. Right? Other than the normal variables. Now you don't have control, which is awesome, right? There's all kinds of opportunity and promise, but now you don't have control, and you can kind of just see the front door. Now we need, as a critical core part of process, is to have visibility end to end. And I'm challenging all the development guys out there, not ops guys. Yeah, and ops guys. How about that? The application development community has to think about the end state of the application design, right? Where are you putting it? Who's running it? What are the tiers? What is your visibility? What's your ability to manage the supplier and the app and resolve problems as part of the design process? It's not a just throw it over the wall to the ops guys, which we used to be able to do when it was inside, right? A complete rethinking of the problem. So, we've heard from lots of customers and lots of suppliers that the challenge for the broad community, because they're already in the game, right, is about the visibility and how do we actually solve it and start to diagnose the problems and go about it from an approach standpoint. So we are announcing this week a free, open community, right, that we and our partners have created. It's called cloudsleuth.net. And what you can do is go out there and interact with live running data. There's a couple different applications out there to see exactly what is the performance of the cloud guys. And when you go out on the site, you'll see all the brand names that you know and others. Right? How are the applications actually running? Right? And you can compare, and you can start to see the effect, for example, of geography. Where are your customers? I said that the app dev guys have to know and think about the problem, what they're solving. They have to think about the design in the physical world. Right? So you can see geographically what the effect is if I host here, 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 right? How I do caching and so on. And then number 2, we've started to create some demonstrations and where you can actually look at some solutions. And we're asking our partners and our competitors to get into this game with us to help solve the problems that all of you are facing. Right? Let's put up real working illustrations of how we actually can affect performance and availability. Right? Let's put up working examples of the solutions that you're all looking for from an app standpoint. So when you think about that point, the change in the architecture, the other thing that fundamentally changes is what is the measure, right? What is the context for how you look at this problem? And it's not the same as where we were because we don't have the visibility that we did, right? The context, in fact, is from the user standpoint. I submit to you that the fundamental approach has to start with what's the effect. Remember we said these are top-line apps. So we have to start understanding what the effect is and look at the application delivery chain metrics for your given app as it runs, right, through the environment, whether they're cloud services or internal, and put that in. Number two, though, a big shift is what is the remember, we're talking about a shared world. What is the collective effect, right, of all the traffic on the given resources? Collective intelligence, the analytics about the supplier or the whole internet, right, whatever is broken, is very, very valuable information that now can give you some indication. Is it me, right, or is it one of the providers in the chain to resolve quickly? So you have to bring both points of view together, not just your own app data. So the end user experience is critical, and I love this lady. I'm guessing you've seen her on TV. Actually, I hate this lady, but I like the commercials. So Progressive Insurance, right? You can go out and see some of their ads, and this is top-line, business-critical stuff, right, that consumers are interacting with. And so you go out here, and they show you prices and so on, and they've got an offer there to do something. But one of the other complexity points is the number of devices and combinations. So we support the testing of 500 OS browser combinations because of all the devices out there. And I think 5,000 different device types because, again, we all believe we can get to everything from anywhere. And so the reality is it doesn't all come out the same. And when you go look at cross-browser testing, so you look at this example, right, and you can see versus the original application, there's no offer box when this thing is rendered under Safari, right? Or on this side, the image is cut off versus the original one. You can see the difference here. And depending on how that is built, it can make a big difference. So there are so many combinations. The practical reality of doing this by hand is not. So we've introduced a brand new solution called Render Inspector, which basically automates looking at and quickly flagging what are the differences between the kind of the baseline that you're measuring against and how it varies across the applications in different formats. Okay, so you've got the end user's perspective, you've got all these layers, and the ideal case, right? The ideal solution is you need a single dashboard where you put that all in place that you can first of all determine, what is the basic status? Is it red, yellow, green of a given app or a service versus what do our traditional tools point of view, right? CPU cycles, I/O, whatever it may be, right? What is the status of the app, right? And then can I look at what we showed before? Is it data center? Is it service providers? Is it the general internet? And from there, right, we know what the situation is and what the trend is. Okay. This mouse doesn't like me today. Let's see here. All right. From there, we can follow that same point of view and start to drill down. So the first thing is we talked about the users and what the effect is. We want to try to relate all the solutions you've been hearing about for the last day. This is I can provision this, I can speed up, I can spin up images quickly, I can adjust capacity, right? And if we know that there's a trend shift, right, either response time or usage, we want to be able to take and tie that change, right, specifically to the data center or the assets that we're having a challenge with. They must be linked. We have to tie together the end user experience very specifically to the underlying assets. What we've done from a company standpoint, right, is then let you be able to follow that all the way down. So if you pick the data center, right, we can start to look at the different layers of the transactions. We can look at the different tiers from database, app tier, and in fact go, if you will, from the JavaScript at the client and follow that all the way to the Java method and drill all the way down through all the tiers. It fundamentally, the context has to be provided for all that data that we've been collecting for all these years, and it is the application, but right from the point of view of the end user, because that's really what's valuable. Okay, so let me give you a couple recommendations what I think I would do, particularly in the context of the cloud providers. The first thing is, kind of sounds simple, but you need to start with what are your goals. And there really are a whole bunch of different goals. What are you going to measure these guys on? Right? Is your goal cost? Is your goal, I need extra capacity? Is your goal bursting? Is your goal, I just need elasticity because I have a seasonality issue? Right? What is the problem? Because that needs to fundamentally define and frame what do you measure the suppliers on. Right? Number two, then evaluate the suppliers based upon those goals. Right? So how does this really work today? Generally, my perception is that the suppliers tell you what their SLAs are. They tell you what they can do, and here it is. I submit that's really the wrong thing. Maybe there's some standard things that they offer, but you really need to start with your business and the business objectives and figure out to the extent, can you tie what you're trying to accomplish, right, back to what the service providers can do, and look at that holistically. Right? So if it's capacity, right, there's do I put enough headroom in there? And how does that actually affect how I measure the supplier? Right? Looking at elasticity and based on how quickly can they actually scale up and down. Right? And dirty little secret, because we've tested this, it isn't all the same. And they can't spin this stuff up as fast as they say. It depends on the supplier and all that, but we've actually measured it. Right? So you have to put the measures in place based upon the problem you're trying to solve and the metric. Okay, so wrap up, and then let me take a few questions. The fundamental architecture has changed, right? Obviously, it's being delivered across the web, but the computing execution has fundamentally moved outside in addition to inside, right? You need to look at that complexity as it shifts and set up the approach that you have visibility across both ends because these are your most important applications. Right? You need to monitor that application based upon your goals. Everything is not created equally. Right? And we believe that that's an ongoing thing in addition to a baselining thing. Would you really put something into production if you hadn't load tested it? Well, everybody here does load testing probably. Inside of the data center, probably, inside of your company. Do you load test on the outside where now most of the execution is being done? How do you know it will work? How do you know the providers can handle it? How do you know the app's going to work on the outside and the inside? Right? So you need to do that as a baseline, and then you're going to need to monitor on an ongoing basis. Right? And I submit that the most important measure is aligning that to the end user experience because that really defines how the business looks at it. All right, so let me stop on the slides and take questions, comments, or somebody who wants to debate the data. No questions? All right, very good. Thank you very much. Have a great conference.